Hi guys, my name is Dave Alley, and I am the Next Steps Director here at the Chapel. Our mission here at the Chapel, as you know, is to help people meet, know, and follow Jesus. And isn't it easy just to let those words just roll off our tongues and not even really consider their meaning? Our job is to help people experience life change. In group life, we say it like this: life change happens in circles and not rows. And that even is a loaded statement, don't you think? I mean, the main idea here is that our lives aren't transformed by information exchange. Our lives are transformed as we take what we are learning in the Bible, the mind, and we walk it out through authentic relationships, the heart. Let me demonstrate what I mean. I want you to think about your top 5 sermons of all time, the ones you've heard. Do you remember the sermon points? What was the passage scripture that you were studying? Well, how about this? Can you tell me the top 5 people in your life that have impacted you spiritually? I'm betting you can. And you can probably even tell me how they've challenged you in specific moments they've impacted your life. And that's what we mean when we say circles and not rows. Life change happens through relationships. And so that's why the bottom line to success in groups here at the Chapel is life change. So let's dive into our training and let's figure out how we can create environments where authentic relationships lead to life change. Now, in front of you, you may have a community group guide. And if not, you can find a digital copy below to flip through and even download. You can use this as a guide, as a reference throughout this video. And my hope, regardless if you are leading a community group, a men's group, a women's group, or even a support group, that we're all working from the same playbook. Now, before we open these, let me just say, my goal is to give you a brief overview of this book. We can't cover everything in such a small amount of time. So it's your responsibility as a group leader to take a deeper dive into the details of how we want you to organize your groups. And this guide, it's not just for community groups, even though it says that on the cover. It's for men's groups, women's groups, and support groups. Your curriculum may be different in one of those other groups than the sermon-based discussion questions that we use in community groups, but the components of the group are going to still be the same. So as you open your book, the first 2 pages cover our mission statement and talk about why groups are important. It's just what we've already covered so far. If you turn to the next 2 pages, you'll see our discipleship pathway. And we use this picture to talk about the 4 environments that people engage with and are discipled through the Chapel. And I want you to notice where all of the groups fit into this structure. They fit into grow. That's how people are discipled. They into the discipleship pathway. Now, if you look at the next page shows our group structure and how it mirrors Jesus' ministry. If you'll notice, Jesus spoke to lots of crowds, feeding the 5,000, Sermon on the Mount. So do we. We speak to crowds. As Jesus met in a larger circle, full of men and women, the disciples, right? So do we. We call those community groups. And Jesus even handpicked a few people out of that larger group, Peter, James, and John, and they were with him during his highest of high moments, Mount of Transfiguration, and lowest of lows, Garden of Gethsemane. We do that as well. We do that through our D groups. And on the next page, you flip one more, you'll see the differences between community groups and D groups. Now, I'm a picture guy. I love graphs, and so I love this page. But I won't point out everything here, but the biggest differences in community groups and D groups are this. 1, notice makeup. In community groups, we have not yet believers. That's what we call them. But in D groups, we have believers, and that's because D groups are for discipleship, and believers are discipled, not non-believers. Curriculum, you'll notice that in community groups, we use discussion questions from our sermon aligned curriculum. In D groups, we use the Chapel Bible reading plan. Now, they're not exactly the same, but they're all aligned. Our components, you'll see the 4 S's, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit over there on community groups. And on D groups, we have different components. Growth expectations. Within community groups, we want to see community groups multiply to produce D groups and even more community groups. These next 2 pages, if you'll turn your booklet one more page, I think are some of the most important pages in the booklet. As we create strategy for groups, we could make up anything we want. But like anything we do in our lives, we want God's word to dictate why and how we execute ministry. So for community groups, our blueprint is Acts 2:42 to 47. And so I just want to take a minute to read this passage with you as you look at it with me. Acts 2:42 to 47. It says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. And every day they continued to meet in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." Now, as I have read this passage over and over, looking for insights, trying to replicate the disciples' model, 4 components stand out. And you'll see them over there on your left side of the page. 1, they studied the apostles' teaching. They didn't have the Bible at that time, but they had apostles, disciples who had walked with Jesus, and those disciples taught what Jesus had taught them, and they studied those teachings. 2, they ate, fellowship, and hung out together. Very, very important. 3, they prayed for, they cared for, and they met one another's needs. And last, they lived sent lives. They shared the gospel with everyone they came in contact with. How do we know that? Well, you see it right there in verse 47. The Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. And how were they being saved? Well, people were sharing with them. If you'll go ahead and turn to the next page, you'll see how we take these 4 components, and as I wrestled with these components, 4 words rose to the surface, and you'll see them there. Study, socialize, support, and send. So, what's our game plan for groups? This is it. This is the playbook. These 4 components. And we want every community group, men's group, women's group, and support group to work towards incorporating these 4 things into their group. Why? Because I said so? No. Because this is what we see the early church do. And this is what they modeled for us. So go ahead and turn to the next page, and we're going to take a deeper dive into each one of these components. All right, first, study. Now, as a leader, you will facilitate discussions based on Bible passages and the application from our pastor's sermon. Our Next Step team will provide you and your group members with sermon-based discussion questions. And you can find these within the Church Center app or even on our website. You'll see the URL in the booklet. Now, on the next page, you will see tips for best practices for leading a discussion. Now, I don't have time to go through all of this, but there are great nuggets in there for how you can be a great facilitator of some awesome discussions. So let's go ahead and move to our next component, and that is socialize. Let me ask you, why do you think socializing is so important? Have you thought about that? I think the first answer is because it's in the Bible. We see the early church doing that. But here's the other thing. I think the other reason for it is what's written right there in the book for you. If you look at the last sentence on this paragraph here, it says, when fellowship is embraced, it breeds authenticity and vulnerability, which opens the door for people to share on an intimate level. There is something spiritual that happens to us when we break bread. The walls that we have, they come down and people begin to open up. Now, on the other page, you'll see ideas for ways that you can socialize within your home or in the environment that you're meeting in. If you flip one more page, you'll see a whole list of icebreakers. Now, these are icebreakers that I have used for years in groups that I've led before starting a discussion. And what's great is when you use an icebreaker, it gets people laughing and sharing about their lives, and it really helps set the stage for discussion and gets people opening up. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next component, and that is support. Now, as group leaders, it is paramount that you embrace the care and the support of people in your group. When group members experience difficult seasons in their lives, we want their community group or their support group or men's group, women's group to be the place that they turn to for support. And one of the best ways you can practice this is in your prayer time. You'll see the effective prayer strategy on this next page. And this strategy can truly transform your prayer time in your group. So I'd encourage you to read through that and practice that. But prayer is a great way to support the people within your group. Now, as we expect you to care for the people in your group, we want to make sure that we care for you. And that is why we have group coaches. Now, with the long list of community groups and men's group and women's groups and groups that we have here at the chapel, it's hard for our group life team to truly care for each one of you as leaders effectively. And so we have empowered key leaders here in our church who have been veterans in our group life ministry for a long time. And we want you to have a safe place that you can ask questions, share concerns, and be prayed for and supported. So if you'll turn one more page, we will talk about send. Now, send is really broken up into two parts, outreach and multiplication. In outreach, our goal for every community group is to reach each neighborhood in Baton Rouge. And we do that by finding ways to pray for, invest in, and invite non-believers into our lives and even into our groups. And so on the next page, you will see our pray and invest, invite strategy spelled out with ideas, several ideas on how you can do this well, both personally and as a group. Now, multiplication simply means that we are constantly making disciples that make disciples. Remember, the Lord added to the early church daily those who were being saved. I want you to think about that. That meant that they were constantly having to grow and multiply leaders all over the city where they started and even into new regions and even into new cities. And as a result, here at the chapel, we want you guys to identify new leaders, coach them up, and send them out to start both community groups and D groups within your community group. All right, on the next page, if you'll turn one more, you will see a template for structuring your group. Now, I didn't make this one up. This is one that my wife and I have used for years in community groups that we've led. And it actually incorporates all the components that we talked about. You'll notice in week 1, you start by socializing and then studying the Bible together. And you spend the last time together supporting one another in prayer. Week 2, you may have a dinner or a social event, socializing and supporting one another. Week 3 is a lot like week 1. And then week 4 may be a night out. Maybe it's even a service project where y'all go and lock arms together and do something together as a group where you serve. And then week 5, if there is one, you can kind of pick and choose. Now, some of you may not like this because it doesn't fit with the rhythms of how you do your group. And that's fine. However, I would ask that you make sure that the monthly rhythm that you use includes all 4 of these components. And if you're just starting out, just starting leading a group, this is a great template to start with. So if you go ahead and turn to the next page, let's talk about your first month. You'll see first month essentials. Please read through these before your first meeting. You don't want to walk into your first community group meeting like it's business as usual. So week 1, we would love for you to spend time breaking the ice, getting to know one another. Discuss the structure of your group. Set expectations. Talk about how long you're going to meet during the semester. Weeks 2 through 4, plan a social event. Or even have your group volunteer at an event to serve the city. Take time explaining what our pray, invest, and invite strategy is. Help them to understand our mission to reach each neighborhood here in Baton Rouge. You can even submit a Go Grant for a way that you can do an event for your neighborhood and reach those neighborhoods and let the church pay for it. All right, on the last page, you will see the Church Center app. Now, what is the Church Center app? Internally, we have a goal here in Group Life of seeing at least 50% of the attendees that call the chapel their home in a group. And the only way we can measure if they're even coming to a group is through group attendance. And so I won't go through everything on this page, but here are some things that we would love for you to do using the Church Center app. 1, check attendance each week. When people come into your home, it's very simple, takes really quick. Just check them off and let us know who's in your group. Well, how do you do that? Well, first you have to manage the members in your group by adding and removing the right people, something you can also do within the app. And then let us know that they're there each week. You can also access sermon discussion questions. And then you can also use the Church Center app to message members in your group. Now, some of you may use GroupMe or iMessage or some other messaging app, but you can also use Church Center app for that. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Not only that, thank you for wanting to lead a group. I want you to remember that the bottom line for success in our groups is life change. And the way we see life change is through authentic relationships. And the way we cultivate authentic relationships is by our components: studying, socializing, supporting, and sending. Please email our team with any additional questions you have. Thank you again for watching the video. Take care.